It's Tuesday. It's the end of March. Not the Ides of March, the end of March. And you guys know what that means. It's time to close out the month of Irish drinking and extra pours of Guinness and talking like a drunken idiot with a fantastic whiskey brand. Welcome to Keep It Up with Kilbeggan. My name is Sam Nash Green. I am at Scribe Spirits on Instagram. I'm joined by my dear friend, Mr. Michael Egan, Irish Whiskey National Brand Ambassador for the Kilbeggan Distilling Company. Mike, welcome.
Thanks, Sam. How are you? Thank you for having me.
I had too much bourbon last night. Let's put it that way. My head still hurts.
What were you having?
Actually, a bean brand, Nuts and Knob Creek.
Lovely. What was the occasion? Monday.
Just wanted to drink.
Yeah.
Monday. Good enough occasion for me, right?
Good for you. Good for you.
Our friend Joe Van Name is on. Hey, Joe, welcome to the show. Joe is based in the Maryland, Virginia area and is also a whiskey somm and graduate of the program that I went through in Texas.
Lovely. I remember that. I remember that program you went through. I followed you.
Yeah.
On social media. When was that? Like 16, 17?
Like 17, 18.
Was it? Yeah, it looked fairly intense.
I wouldn't say intense, but definitely had its challenges. It's a good program, and I want to go back to it, actually.
Yeah.
But what I really want to do is I just started my certification in Irish whiskey from the John O'Connor.
Amazing, isn't it? I've looked into it. I'm baffled that it takes the Scotch Whisky Association to have something up and running like that. But I mean, it's if Fernand and his name is attached to it. I'm sure it's a fantastic course. And I already know of a number of people that have gotten involved in it and have signed up. So good for you.
I signed up because Irish whiskey is one of my weakest points, but also because with Fernand's name attached to it, it's going to be a fantastic course. Now, I only know Fernand thanks to Barry Chandler and the Stories and Sips podcast. If you guys don't know that, definitely give Barry a listen. It is a great podcast, and his Irish accent is very velvety. No, it's a great accent. It's a great podcast. And Mike, a big thank you to you as well, because you recommended the book, to Barry. I went to him, I'm like, off your recommendation, and he's drawing 3 names from his Irish Whiskey Fans of America group to send books to.
Amazing. I mean, yeah.
So we did a partnership with him.
That's great. Yeah, he's done a phenomenal job at building that group. Really, really engaged group of Irish whiskey and whiskey in general lovers across the States. And it's super just to be a member of it and see the ongoing daily conversations about every brand under the sun, which is good to see. It's a good reflection as to how many people across the country enjoy Irish whiskey and the conversations going on about the category, which is nice.
And we're going to get into that in just one second. I do want to give a quick shout out to Donner Pass, who's in the chat. Hey, buddy, welcome back. Nice to see you again. And then Joe Van Name says, hey, Michael, my wife's great-grandmother was an Egan.
No way. Hopefully by Joseph, if you can find out where, maybe you've done your ancestry or you've looked into it, but where she was from. That would be amazing.
And he also said that the Edinburgh Whiskey Academy does good work. I agree. Egan is a good name.
Super name. Yeah.
So speaking on Irish whiskey, I need a little bit of hair of the dog. So what are we drinking first?
Well, I actually, because it's the closest to me and open, I just poured a drop of Kilbeggan Original, which is your middle bottle.
You want to start with the original?
Yeah, why not? I didn't open my single grain yet, so we can crack into that and start talking about it.
Oh, I love that sound. Fresh crack.
Yeah, so and unfortunately I couldn't get you to rye.
Yeah, so
Chris from Facebook might be tasting it with me, but I have a bottle here beside me and one behind me. Another
so
beautiful
tell us a
whiskey.
little about the rye, because an Irish rye whiskey, that's not a common thing. So just
But hang on, we
let's
can't
touch
skip
on it
ahead, Joe, because
briefly.
we won't touch on it briefly, Sam, because I have a bottle of it beside me. So we should give it almost as much time as the other three whiskeys that I'm going to try here.
But I don't have a bottle, so
I know, I'm sorry. Well, here, I'll give you a little, very quick, brief synopsis of the rye, and then we can dive into it a little deeper when I pour it, maybe in a little bit. But it's, you're right, it's an Irish rye whiskey. Not something you read about and hear about a whole lot within the Irish category. It's an old 1800s heritage mash bill from Kilbeggan Distillery. So when the distillery was revived in, are you frozen? You there? Oh, you're just enjoying the whiskey. When
I'm
the
just
distillery
really enjoying this glass of whiskey.
Good man. When the distillery was reopened back in 2010, the team set their sights on reintroducing some of these old heritage mash bills, and rye was one of them. So malted barley, unmalted barley, and 30% rye. So very, very low in comparison to an American rye. It's a lower rye content. Obviously, to be a US rye, you're over 51% rye. So this is only 30. So it's quite mellow, a mellow spice. It's more comparable to a pot still Irish whiskey. So like our pot still, which is in the middle of your lineup there, or any of the Powers Redbreast pot stills that we're very used to, and a number of other growing and number of pot stills within the category now because of the high, because of the malted barley and unmalted barley content in it. But
now,
it's funny
real
because,
quick,
yeah.
You mentioned Powers and you mentioned Redbreast. We're seeing Irish whiskey moving back towards age statements, and not just age statements, but older age statements. Can we expect to see something like that from the Kilbeggan anytime soon? I know that obviously the Chicano, which is also a brand that you represent, has 16 and an 18 and some fantastic finishes. But can we see anything like that from the Kilbeggan?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of aged whiskey at Kilbeggan Distillery. Don't forget to Kilbeggan Distillery as a building itself and as a distillery, really started making whiskey again in 2010. So the oldest whiskey that we can taste that's been made in our lifetime, and there's two in front of me, one in front of you, 100% from that distillery, is pot still and rye, and that is still, both pot still and rye are around 8 to 9 years old, laid down in 2010, released in 2019 and January 2020 for pot still, for Kilbeggan pot still, and 19 for Kilbeggan rye. So they are in or around 8, 9 years, which is old enough for a whiskey. We do have, obviously, as you're well aware, we have Kilbeggan 15, 18, 21. Connemara has a number of age.
I wasn't aware.
Really? Yeah.
I've never seen them.
We have Kilbeggan. Hang on, my earphone's going to plug out here. We have Kilbeggan 19-year-old. You heard of that guy?
No.
Right there. Released as a limited release in Pennsylvania. So there are certainly aged expressions and whiskies under the Kilbeggan banner. And I've no doubt that over the next couple of years we will see a couple more aged Kilbeggans, so whiskies bearing the Kilbeggan name, introduced to the US and around the world.
Very cool. Thank you.
We're really fortunate to have that. And the category is still young, Sam, as well. So there's only a handful of distilleries that have whiskey from their distilleries that are over 6, 7, 8 years old, So, and then
it's Cooley, Middleton, and Kilbeggan, right?
Yeah, Bushmills would have some as well.
And Bushmills.
Yeah. Cooley, Kilbeggan being one distillery too. So yeah, I mean.
Oh yeah, sure. I get that confused.
No, it's and again, Cooley in terms of production in our lifetime is slightly older than Kilbeggan because that's been producing whiskey since 1987 when it reopened. So yeah, it's still but to your point there will be a lot more brands releasing older stuff as the distilleries get older, but it's a really exciting time for the category. Because even though I was tuned into a lot into, we mentioned Finan O'Connor, I was tuned into the work that he's doing with Bourbon Distillery and stuff. And he makes a good point in saying that the category from the outside looking in seems extremely old, which it is, but we're in a special time right now because we're at the youthful stage of the renaissance of Irish whiskey, if that makes sense, you know. So we're seeing a lot of innovation. We're seeing a lot of innovating through historic mash bills like rye and pot still, and an appetite for that around the States and around the world, which is great.
You know, I feel like this renaissance, as you've put it, this renaissance is coming about. You know, people are just starting to get interested in Irish whiskey again after the junk that was brought to them during Prohibition. You know, just over 100 years ago with Prohibition. So I feel like, especially right now, people are just coming back to it. And brands are just starting to get back up and running because it's taken that long from Prohibition to really, you know, the brands that were out there, the Bushmills, the Middletons, you know, and even to an extent, you know, Cooley Kilbeggan, they had whiskey, but it was going into, you know, blends, and people weren't really appreciating the quality of the single malts or the pot stills or the single grains that are coming out of Ireland. And now, you know, that whiskey and more whiskey people are more connoisseurs and, you know, aficionados and nerds. Everything's starting to come back around.
Yeah. And yeah, you're right. And Joseph asked a good question there about is we're tasting all Kilbeggan. There is a couple of so we also make whiskies, which we'll try and talk about tonight, that bear the Kilbeggan name, that are actually made at Cooley Distillery. So Cooley, for those of you, and Joseph, I'm not sure if you noticed, but Cooley and Kilbeggan Distillery are two separate distilleries in Ireland, but part of the Kilbeggan Distilling Company, and we're all owned by Beam Suntory right now. But Kilbeggan as a distillery itself only has two very, very small pot stills. We don't have a column still. So any of the blended whiskey, like the Kilbeggan blend that Sam and I are tasting now, is a combination of Cooley Kilbeggan. A lot of the majority Cooley, a small portion of the malt made at Kilbeggan does go into the Kilbeggan blend. And then Kilbeggan single grain, which we'll try next, which is on Sam's, the left of Sam's line up there. That's made at Cooley Distillery because it's made in a column still or a big continuous still. So that's made at Cooley Distillery, but it bears the Kilbeggan name.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mike. Hope that answers your question, Joe. So let's talk about the Kilbeggan original. Because, yes, God, this is rich and just buttery and apples. Just so much apple and, like, you know, baked apple. So
for sure.
Good.
It's so blend. So for those of everyone watching that is could be unfamiliar with a blended Irish whiskey, a blend simply means a blend of different ingredients. In this case, we're tasting out Kilbeggan traditional or Kilbeggan blended whiskey, and it's a blend of malted barley and French summer corn. So give or take a couple of percent, it's about 80 to 85% grain or corn, 15 to 17, 18, 20% malted barley. So the majority grain in the bottle is corn, and we get our corn from France. It's non-GMO French summer corn, and we distill that. We distill that in a big column still. Obviously, our malt runs through the pot stills at Cooley Distillery, and then blended after maturation as well. So both matured in bourbon casks for a period of about 4 to 5 years. It's the youngest whiskey in our lineup tonight. But
now,
saying that,
real quick, Mike, sorry again to jump in here. While we're talking about technical specs on, you know, mash bills and production, would you mind for our viewers just to go over kind of the general rules and regulations and laws that govern Irish whiskey?
Yeah.
Because it may seem like the Wild West, but it's actually very, very strict.
Yeah, it is strict. Probably not as strict as bourbon, and I know you're probably more familiar with the bourbon technical file as in comparison to the Irish whiskey technical file, and that is quite strict. I've often heard Adam. I mean, you've had Adam on this show, so he probably went through the technical file there. But the guys, Adam and our bourbon team, and Fred included, talking about how much your hands are tied within bourbon production. But Irish whiskey is not the Wild West. It's a little looser, and it's just product mature or made, distilled, matured in Ireland, aged in wooden casks. So there's the opportunity to go and explore outside of oak, for a period of no less than 3 years. So very, very similar to Scotland, Sam, and bottled at a minimum 80 proof, 40%. So there's a lot of room there to mess about with, whether it's distillation methods, whether you're using column still, pot still, whatever it happens to be, the grains that you're using, the casks that you're using to mature, and then obviously your bottling at 40%. So it's loose enough to allow distillers and maturation teams to play around with it to create very, very different styles of whiskey and flavor profiles from whatever they're making.
Now, you hit the nail on the head. Something that you mentioned that you kind of glossed over. Just, you touched on it, but you kind of, you moved on. Well, yes, it's like Scotland. As you said, it just has to be wooden casks in Ireland. Sure. And that is huge, because that allows you guys to do, weirder finishes and weird experiments. I know, a competitor brand has chestnut, or had chestnut.
Yeah.
Pardon me. The Topo Chico's making me belch.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, there's a couple of brands that have explored chestnut as well now. Various different wood types. It's exciting. It's exciting from my point of view. I mean, I definitely don't have a direct say as to what the maturation team and blending team will be doing, but it's cool to be part of a conversation where you can suggest wood types, or you could suggest different things that in another category in another country you mightn't be able to suggest. But one thing sorry, go on.
No, please.
No, I was saying one thing that we were talking about it being slightly not the Wild West, but one thing the Irish Whiskey Association, which is the governing body over the category, is working on now is to try and secure as many GI, or geographical indicators, basically, in as many countries as possible. So regardless of where you go in the world, ideally you'd have it in every country. That's quite tough. But wherever you go and you buy a bottle of Irish whiskey, that bottle and that label complies with the technical file set forth by the association. Right now, there's a number of countries where you can make whatever you want and label it as Irish whiskey, and that's deceiving, and that's difficult difficult for a genuine Irish whiskey to compete in those markets. So that's one area of the technical file. It's the broader it's the broader technical file there, but it's one area that the association are trying to work hard on, which I think is brilliant.
Irish whiskey is getting a lot of attention right now because of Mark Rainier at Waterford and his terroir-driven expressions and experiments. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about, how you see terroir in whiskey?
Yeah, and I love it. And Barry is hosting the Waterford whiskey podcast as well. So if you haven't listened to that, get on and check that out, because it's fantastic.
I have not. I should.
I was in the car the other day listening to it, and I told you I was in Boston, actually, and I was driving to Boston, and coincidentally we drove through, I think it must be in, someone could correct us on the phone here, but it might be in Pennsylvania, past Erie, or maybe just before we hit Buffalo or Rochester or whatever, Buffalo. We hit a place called Waterford, and I couldn't believe it that I was listening to the podcast driving through Waterford in upstate New York, maybe. But yeah, what Mark is doing is I love it. I think it's a brilliant opportunity to basically compare farmer or grower to grower, and to see whether you're on the coast, or your field, say, is in a shade area filled with shade. How does that impact not just your barley that you're growing, but how does that impact the end product? And one of the production team were on one of the podcasts, or one of the episodes that I listened to last week, and they were really stressing how it's not just about scale and about producing as much whiskey as possible. They're genuinely interested in the flavor and the terroir and how different regions within a pretty small area can deliver different flavors. On the flip side of it, I also think it's really, really cool to be a farmer and a barley grower, and to have your farm and your name associated with a bottle on a shelf, which must instill so much pride into that farmer and family that are associated with it. And one of the guys in the podcast used the point where you have farmers delivering their barley to various other brands and other areas of the food agricultural business or food business, and they can see where their barley actually goes. A lot of the time, farmers don't actually see where their barley's going. You can't actually point out a bottle on a shelf and say, I'm directly responsible, or my barley's directly responsible for that. So I love what they're doing, and I'm excited to continue tasting their expressions and diving into terroir. And I think they're really taking it, going at it from such a scientific angle, which is super. I think if you were probably to zoom out a bit and have a look at terroir and Irish whiskey, there's definitely like even Cooley Kilbeggan, for example. Whiskies matured at Kilbeggan aren't exposed to as much of the seaside influence that whiskies at Cooley are exposed to. So that's gonna impact the maturation process or the flavor profile. If you have whiskies that are made on Dingle Distillery is on the very west coast of Ireland, there's a different climatic kind of influence there than you'd get at Kilbeggan, which is very deep in the Midlands of Ireland. So it's a great.
What about up in the north with Bushmills?
Exactly. Last week or 2 weeks ago, Jack spoke about, say, Sexton, and how it's shaped after the Giant's Causeway. That's an area that's extremely exposed to different conditions over the course of a year.
Hugely so,
and
yeah.
Bushmills, and that's going to have a direct impact on the end product. Even within Beam Suntory, if you were to take, for example, Simon Brooking always talks about Lefroy and how Lefroy and Bowmore and some of our Isla Scotches that are
yum.
Yeah, you like Pete. But we're
gonna have to have you back to talk about Connemara now. You know that, right? Like now
cool.
You've got it in my head that I need some peated whiskey.
Yeah, I have a bottle here. If you have one, you can grab. But I mean,
I should have bought some. I almost bought some today, and I'm like,
yeah. No, I think the areas and the grains that you're using and it has 100% has an impact on flavor. And I think what the guys are doing in Waterford is brilliant.
I agree completely. But we're not here to talk about Waterford. We're here to talk about Kilbeggan. So let's get back to the original.
So you mentioned a few flavor profile or tasting notes.
Delicate.
Yeah, I mean, Cooley Distillery has always had, and I'm sure you're familiar. I don't know if his name is in the book, but Noel Sweeney is now with Powerscourt Distillery, but was the master distiller and blender in Cooley and Kilbeggan, so in the Kilbeggan Distilling Company up until a few years ago. And Noel always spoke about how, I remember when I first started with Beam Global or Kilbeggan back in late 2012, 13, sitting in Noel's office and not even being able to comprehend how he did or does what he does now still. Even Sarah Dowling, our blender and distiller there right now. But they always talk about the DNA that's associated with the whiskies. And time after time, Cooley Distillery, Distillate and Kilbeggan, mostly Cooley, delivers a very kind of light, fruity distillate with a lot of green apple and lemon and citrus notes. So I find regardless of what it is, Sam, whether it's a Connemara, a peated whiskey, or you're making Tyrconnell, which is 100% malted barley, or you're tasting the blend, which we're having right now, which is obviously made up of grain and malted barley, that DNA still stands up. And that's the green apple kind of citrus note. So I think as we nose and taste our way through the 3 for you, whiskies that we have here today, you'll get that kind of common DNA across the board, which is nice. It's good it makes it slightly easier, I think, to identify a Cooley whiskey because I find that a lot of that kind of those similar tasting notes or flavor profiles on the nose are there.
I think I need to do a head-to-head of Irish whiskey blends. Just, the base entry-level SKU for every Irish whiskey that I can get my hands on. Kilbeggan, Bushmills, Jameson, Middleton, etc., Teeling. Just do a
Yeah,
head-to-head and, do it blind. That'd be really fun, I think.
yeah, of course. And from a price point, I think what we got that in Mission today for $24 or something like that, or maybe a little less. So it's extremely affordable, for a whiskey that's made in I mean that has older brothers and sisters that are some of the most awarded Irish whiskies on the market, which is great.
Absolutely. Joe asked a really interesting question. He said, "Is a light distillate from its construction format in old vodka days?"
And old vodka days. Yeah, so it is a very light distillate, Joe. We double distill everything at Cooley and Kilbeggan, so that's going to produce obviously a light distillate as well that has very flavor driven. We also, our copper pot stills at Cooley Distillery are two twin identical 16,000 liter stills, so that's gonna, and with a very very big bulb, with a very narrow neck, and I should pull up a photo, Sam, if I can, of Cooley. But
Please.
I'm sure you can
Yeah.
you can figure it out. I don't know how to share my screen on this, but you can Google
Just
it.
go ahead and do it, and I'll set it up. Just go ahead and share it like you normally would. It's at the bottom, and then I'll pop it on.
Well, I don't have any. I'd have to go on and find them. But give us a second, and I'll have a look. But it produces a very very light distillate. It's only the lightest distillate that gets out of that pot still. It increases the level of reflux within the still, so you're getting a very very light distillate, and that directly impacts the flavor, and that's why we have a very very light fruity whiskey end product. And then the caramel, I get a lot of honey or caramel notes, which are vanilla, which are directly from the bourbon casks that we use. And across the board, we're fortunate, obviously, to be part of Beam Suntory for a number of reasons. One in particular is when maturing the whiskies, we have a really really solid team over in America to go to, Beam and Makers, and we mentioned Knob Creek and a bunch of different bourbons that are under our umbrella. But to go to those teams and actually hand select casks that we need to mature Kilbeggan, and we know that the casks and the barrels that we're getting over have previously held number one great whiskies, and are top quality as well. So it's great for maturing, and the pot stills then add that light flavor to the whiskey.
It's very full body too, which I really like. It's a little oily, but it's very mouth-filling and full-bodied. It's viscous.
Yeah, and
not, syrupy. It's nice and light. And Jesus Christ, 80 proof?
40%, yeah.
Wow.
So
this is very, very rich and forward, and actually.
Have you not had this before?
I have. I just before, right? Never. I've had them all, I think, before. I think I've had the pot still before. Did I have the pot still when you were in town, or did we do Tyrconnell? No, we did Tyrconnell that day.
Well, pot still only launched last year, so in January of 2020. So right before, 2 months before everything shut down.
You were out here in like early March of 2020, weren't you?
You're right. Yeah, we had meetings in LA.
Yeah, and then I roped you into doing a little tasting at my bar.
That's true. Yeah, and I don't know that pot still landed in California by that stage. Rye would have.
No, then I haven't had pot still yet. That means pot still will be brand new for me. That's cool.
I was actually only thinking about
that. I've definitely had the traditional original before, but it's just a matter of as me personally and professionally, as I taste more and I analyze things more, my palate grows and my experience and understanding and my ability to appreciate these whiskeys grow as well. So, I'm sure I've had it before, but I may not have been able to focus on it quite as much as we are today, because we have more time. We have 2 hours today, whereas the day I met you, 3 odd years ago, we only had about a 45-minute seminar, and it wasn't just you and I chatting. It was you chatting in the room and me, interjecting occasionally and being the annoying know-it-all I am.
That was only last year, Sam. That was one of the last bars I went into and spoke to people outside of friends and family about whiskey.
No. I mean, when I first met you at Stories from the Still.
Oh, years ago. Yeah. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah. And a lot has changed since then. Maybe 2 or 3, if it was 17 or late 16. That was when we did Tyrconnell, wasn't it? The full Tyrconnell lineup,
Yeah.
and down by the Dream Hotel, wasn't that where it was?
At the Dream at the little like pizza spot. Yeah, Lucchini's.
With Christy Caldwell. That's who you were with, right?
No, I didn't know Christy at that time.
Maybe he was there anyway. Yeah.
He might have been. I just didn't know him at the time.
Yeah. Great day.
The guys in the comments are giving me shit. Joe said, annoying? And then Matt says, Sam, you cannot help it.
Yeah. Help what?
Being annoying, like interjecting and being a know-it-all.
Oh, that's okay. That's all right. Some good times, but changed.
Yeah.
We have new whiskies in the lineup
for both of us.
Yeah, true. But the original has stayed the same. We might have had a label refresh since 2017 or 2017, but liquid stays the same. And it's in terms of blended Irish whiskey within a pretty cluttered category. Blended whiskey is in the Irish whiskey category. There's a nice shift now to premiumization and to kind of looking at a different shelf space within Irish. And I think the next 3 whiskies that we'll talk about play nicely within that category, but blends certainly take up the chunk of an Irish whiskey shelf in a liquor store. But I agree with you. I think it would be nice to sit down with 5, 6, 7 blends and have a taste of each and see how different brands, because a lot of them might be coming from similar distilleries or the same distillery, but brands might have put their own tweak on it, and whether it's through age or cask selection, bottling proof,
or even chill filter versus non-chill filtered.
Exactly. Yeah. So just to taste those different nuances, something that I have done but need to do it as well, because there's new entrants to the category every single day now at this stage.
Also, guys, I just want to give a big shout out to Mike and a big thank you. He was a tremendous help in writing the Irish whiskey section for Beginner's Guide to Whiskey. So a big bit of credit goes to him for really helping me narrow down timelines and understanding about Irish whiskey laws and new distilleries popping up every other bloody week.
Yeah, that was easy. We did nothing, Sam. We just chatted on the phone. Good for you for writing it, though. It looks amazing, and I hope sales are going through the roof.
Myself personally, including selling to distilleries, I haven't publicly announced this yet, so I guess I'll announce it here, might as well, to people watching. Beginner's Guide to Whiskey is now available in the gift shop at Buffalo Trace Distillery in Frankfort, Kentucky.
Deadly. Congratulations. That's super.
I am so excited and so holy shit. Because
great.
Everyone knows Buffalo Trace, and it's one of the biggest bourbon distilleries in America.
Hundreds of thousands in a good year. Last year is not a good reference year, but hundreds of thousands of visitors a year, I would assume.
Yeah, and that's, let's say tens of thousands of eyes.
Yeah.
On the book.
Good for you. That's good. You'll have to start working on the second release now.
So everyone wants me to, and I'll say this. If I do a second release, if I do a second book, it will follow this theme, but it will be specific categories. So Beginner's Guide to Irish, Beginner's Guide to Bourbon, Beginner's Guide to real Japanese whiskey. None of the stuff that's brought in from Scotland. I mean, we talk about it. The stuff that's brought in from Scotland and bottled in Japan.
No, but that's brilliant.
So, yeah, that would be the next ones. I told everyone, not everyone, I told my family, but they were all me like, Sam, write another one, write another one, write another one. And I'm like, if we get another complete shutdown, stay-at-home order, I will work on another one.
Yeah. Well, I
But
commend you for keeping yourself busy and doing that. Good for you.
thank you. I'm very excited. So back on to the reason everyone's here. They're not here to listen to me ramble on about the book. They're here to listen to us talk about whiskey, and mostly you. Would you say that the original serves as kind of the foundation for everything else we're going to be tasting today?
Yeah. I mean, Kilbeggan Original, if we didn't have, to be honest with you, if we were tasting single grain, the original, maybe a 15 or an aged expression of Kilbeggan, then yes. But the fact that we're going to taste probably single grain right now, and then hopefully you guys, everyone will enjoy that, and then we're going to kind of deviate off piste a little bit and go into over to Kilbeggan Distillery and taste out two whiskies, one for you again, two whiskies that are 100% made.
You love rubbing that in my face.
At Kilbeggan. No, but you'll get a bottle of rye. We'll get you one.
I'll find a bottle of rye. I'm just laughing about it. It's just funny. That's all it is.
But I always start with, to be honest, in a lineup like this, I would typically start with the grain. It's the lightest. It's the lightest in terms of flavor profile. The lightest whiskey within the lineup. It's a good entry. It's all, so we're going on to it now, but it's 94% corn. So this is quite a unique style of whiskey as well. I've just opened mine, Sam, so I'm going to give it a little pour. So even on the nose, you'll smell how light, and you'll get a lot of those kind of vanilla caramel notes that you did get with Kilbeggan Original, but there's not that malty. So remember I mentioned the green apple citrus DNA from Cooley. It's not as evident here, all right? Because a lot of that stuff, a lot of those flavors on the nose come from those pot stills that I mentioned. So you're getting those green apple notes directly from that pot still. And that's the malted barley component that's giving you that in the blended whiskey. This is a slightly different style of whiskey. It's a single grain. So in Ireland, when we talk about whiskey labels, when we look at a whiskey label and it has single on it, just refers to one distillery. That's all that means. And grain refers to the grain in the bottle. In this case, it's that non-GMO French summer corn. So believe it or not, this is 94% corn, 6% malted barley. All right. So this is like an Irish bourbon. If we were to be making this in America, it would be a bourbon. The malted barley is just there for to kick off the fermentation process. So it doesn't really add a whole lot of flavor to the finished product. We make this. We have three story cylindrical stills in Cooley Distillery. So pretty big stills, where we distill this. And it yields an ABV or an alcohol content of about mid-90s, about 94% ABV straight off the still. And then that goes into a ex-bourbon barrel. So a lot of Maker's Mark, a lot of Jim Beam barrels that if you walked into Cooley and Kilbeggan Distillery, you'll see those casks. I have my Maker's Mark cask on the wall here, stave on the wall. But that's
very cool.
If you go in there, you'll see them all. And that's where we get those flavors, those caramel vanilla notes that I mentioned. So when you get a spirit off a still that is high or mid 90s plus, so 93 or 4%, you stick it into a barrel that's previously held bourbon for a period of about 7 years. It's just going to live there and soak up those flavors. So that's where you get these bourbon-y notes off of this whiskey. It's an Irish whiskey though, so that means that we don't have the kind of heat in that might be associated with a bourbon whiskey. Hey, Chris. And
Chris joined us. He's listening while he drives. Chris, be very careful, especially because you are in the mountains in Colorado and the whiskey can wait. Yeah,
it is, I'm sure. But this is but it's an Irish whiskey, so it's still light. It has that kind of fruity notes that are associated with Irish whiskey that you mightn't get with the bourbon, but it is made very similar to a bourbon. It's aged it's 94% corn, and it's aged for 7 years in bourbon casks.
Now, is that a Tua glass you're using?
This is my Tua glass with our little Kilbeggan handshake on the I'll
I
send you
have
one if you
one
don't have one.
it's in, pardon?
I'll send you one if you don't have one.
I don't. I was about to say I only have one Tua, and it's a Glendalough Tua. It's in the room behind me, actually.
Lovely. Yeah, they're nice. They're nice glasses.
Yeah, they're great glasses. You know, they're the Irish whiskey equivalent of a. They are the Irish whiskey equivalent of a Glencairn.
Yes, yes. Easier to hold. So cheers. Sláinte.
Care to lead us in a toast?
This is Kilbeggan single grain. Oh, yeah, why not? I'll give my favorite toast, and it's I actually got, as I said to you yesterday, my first of two shots yesterday. So I'm looking forward to. I'm already chomping at the bit now to get out to a bar and sit there comfortably and shake hands and with randomers. So I give my little friendship toast because I'm looking forward to making new friends over the next couple of months. So there are good ships, wood ships, ships that sail the sea, but the best ships are friendships, and may they always be. Sláinte.
Sláinte.
But see what I mean there about if you were to taste original versus single grain. This is you don't get those. There's I don't want to say burn because it's not really a burn, but the malted barley in Kilbeggan Original delivers that fruity flavor, and it's not really as evident here in single grain. This is
agreed.
This is a perfect if you were making an Irish old fashioned or it's 43% ABV or 86 proof, I should mention too. So my personal favorite for this is a little Irish twist on a whiskey sour, which is great.
Ooh, what are your specs?
Pardon?
What are your specs? What's your recipe?
Oh, just your basic simple syrup. I'm a man for egg whites, so I do like them in a cocktail.
I am 100% behind a good egg white sour.
Yeah, and fresh lemon. Love it. And then Kristen made some. I don't know what she made it with, but made bitters a couple of months ago. So that drizzled over the top with a nice cherry as well. Tasty cocktail.
So a little over a year ago now, Pernod came in and did a DIY bitters class with some bartenders at the Pint.
Cool.
And I didn't want to take my bitters home with me that day, so I left them at the bar. And then about a week later, everything shut down. So these little like bitters are still there, infusing and soaking in the botanicals in the jar in the dark at the Pint.
Lovely. They'll still be good.
Oh, they'll be great. They'll be really concentrated.
Yeah. Yeah.
Emily says, "Ooh, Irish sour. Yes, please."
It makes a very, very nice whiskey sour. But I mean, any cocktail for that matter. And you mentioned at the start, Sam, tomorrow's the 31st of March. We're finishing up, concluding the very special month that is St. Patrick's Month. So I've had I've had a fair share of single grain whiskey sours over the last 31 days or 30 days. But it makes a great cocktail. It's an easy drinking whiskey.
I look forward to trying it myself.
A couple of ice cubes and it's a very easy sipping whiskey.
Now, do you enjoy your whiskey sour neat or rather up or on rock or on rocks? Because I know there's people go both ways and there's no wrong answer. I personally prefer my sour up.
No, I'm a rock man. One big ice cube maybe. I have this amazing ability to drink quicker than I should. So I figured
Irish is in your blood.
Yeah. I get a bit more bang for my buck when there's a couple of ice cubes or one big ice cube in it. So if I'm out, I don't really order it up. I don't know. I like having an ice cube in the glass as well. Also, I like
nothing wrong with that at all. It helps with dilution.
Yeah, I like it colder too. If I'm sitting here this evening and I'm having one of these whiskeys, it's with a couple of ice cubes. As our friend Dan Tulio, who used to be the Canadian club ambassador, whom you've met a good few times, I'm sure, said, drink your
No.
whiskey. Have you never met him?
Mm-mm.
Drink, legend of a man. Drink what you like, but most importantly, like what you drink, which is a philosophy that everyone should live by as well. So don't never feel like you can't put ice in something if you like it. And I think actually,
I had a guest at the bar I used to work at in Beverly Hills. He would come in, he would get his bottle out of his locker and ask for a cup of ice. And what he would do is he would take a couple ice cubes and put them into his Glencairn with his whiskey. And it made him very happy. He enjoyed his whiskey with ice. And I'm like, hey, as long as you're happy, you're a good guy. And I'm happy to teach you about whiskey if you want to try it neat. I'm also happy to give you ice to put in your whiskey to chill it and dilute it a little bit. Because, like Dan said, drink what you like and like what you drink. There's only one wrong way to drink whiskey, like, in my opinion. Want to know what that way is?
not the way you like it.
Exactly. Only wrong way to drink it is the way you do not like it.
Yeah. Listen, I'm with you. I remember years ago in 2014, say, and doing a lot of whiskey events across America and drinking neat whiskey and some high proof bourbon as well. And you're like, am I really enjoying this, or would I enjoy it more with you remember Two Gingers Irish whiskey, and we had the Big Ginger, which was two gingers, ginger ale, and a lemon and lime, a signature cocktail that we used, which was easy
that was
drinking.
Before I was into whiskey.
Really? But was an easy drinking.
You said I'm 28, cocktail. Right?
Say it again.
You do realize I'm 28 and started drinking. Like, I couldn't drink till 2013.
That's crazy.
I've only been seriously into whiskey for the last, 4 or 5 years.
Well, you've managed to gather a lot of, from the outside looking in, a lot of knowledge and experience in whiskey in 7 short years.
Thank you. I just kind of dove right in when I found out I loved it. I'm like, all right, let's learn about it.
But what I was saying was there was such a pressure on someone new to the whiskey industry that if I was being honest, I was so new and so raw to Irish whiskey. And don't forget, when in 2013, the Irish whiskey category was made up of, Teeling had just started, but really 4 whiskey distilleries. You had Bushmills, Jameson, Middleton, and Cooley Kilbeggan, which is technically part of Beam Suntory. So you were it was if we think we're in our infancy now, we were a lot smaller 8 years ago, or 7 years ago. So being out in bars and being so young, I was 23, and being out and almost being told how to drink your whiskey was put a lot of pressure, and it's refreshing to be able to say, you know what, if I want soda water, or if I want Coke, or if I want whatever I want in a whiskey, just do it as long as you like it. But I'll never forget that. Yeah. But anyway, I would say to someone who has a bottle of single grain in their hand or in their house, if you like it, great. I would encourage you to try it in a classic cocktail like a Manhattan, an old fashioned, or as we spoke about, a whiskey sour, because it stands up really well. And you have one day left in March to do your Irish twist on a classic cocktail.
Really quick, just jumping backwards for a second, I want to share a personal experience talking about, drinking it how you like to. A lot of people who know me, or at least knew me, a couple of years ago, know that my work in bars has been fairly recent. And if you look at my resume, you'll see that my actual work in bars and restaurants is minor, but my education in spirits is not so minor. I applied for a barback position at a new bar that was opening in downtown LA. And the gentleman interviewing me, we had a fairly casual conversation, and he asked me a question. Seeing that my experience, my resume, he's like, if a guest comes in and orders, a 30-year-old Japanese whiskey, and they want it on the rocks. What do? I told him I had to resist, a grimace and a shudder a little bit because it was a fairly casual conversation. But I said, I give it to him. I would suggest, I'd ask them, have you had it neat before? If not, I would try it on its own first, and I'm happy to give you rocks or a rock to add to it afterwards. But if they've had it before and they know because they like it, then absolutely, it's your money, your order, drink it how you want it. I'm not here to judge you. I mean, let's be honest. Every bartender judges how our guests order their drinks. But I asked him the same question, and he said he would refuse to serve it to them. He would serve them the 30-year-old Japanese whiskey and the rocks separate. And I'm just like, that is not hospitality.
Yeah. So
anyway.
No. I see that, and I think you're right in saying that. Asking the question, if the response to the question is no, I've never tried it before, I just want to buy a 30-year-old whiskey. At the end of the day, it's the consumer that's buying it. So who are we or you to say no? You should do it this way, or you have to do it that way.
Exactly, it's their money.
Yeah.
We are just here to facilitate them enjoying themselves.
Yeah.
If the consumer wants feedback and wants, they're like, oh, I've never had it. I was recommended, I got, like my stimulus check and my friend said I should come here and try this whiskey. Do you recommend trying it, a different way? Then that opens up a whole other conversation of
course.
Well, here's how most people learn to appreciate, higher end, more expensive spirits. And this is just one way to do it. There's also this way and this way. There's each of these three methods, even Emily called it a few minutes ago. We're talking about cocktails, up, rock, and rocks. 3 serves, neat, single rock, or multiple rocks. There's also a 4th serve, which is just, water on the side to add a couple of drops at your leisure. There's no wrong way to enjoy it. And especially for a higher end spirit, I really want to make sure that the end consumer, the guest, enjoys it. Again, Emily hitting the nail on the head. Teaching isn't about telling or talking at people.
I remember
about teaching.
I agree with Emily and I agree with you, Sam. I remember being back in Dublin about a couple of years ago anyway, and my mom and dad and my little sister and I went into town for a drink, or I thought we're probably going to a play or somewhere. We popped into a relatively well-known bar, and I got 2 pints of Guinness for Dad and I, and then I ordered Maker's Mark. Might have got a whiskey sour, to be honest, for my mom and my little sister. And I ordered with Makers. They had Makers. It's obviously part of Beam. I'm going to support the brands within Beam for sure. And but more importantly, and most importantly, I like Maker's Mark.
So do I.
It's a lovely whiskey. So anyway, I ordered it, and the bartender pouring his pint says, "Cool, two pints, 2 whiskey sours." He says, "I'll make the whiskey sours with Buffalo Trace." And I was like, "No, it's good, thanks. I'll have Maker's Mark, please." And he's like, "No, I'm telling you, Buffalo Trace, much better, tastes much better than a whiskey sour." And my response to him, after actually 2 or maybe 3 times back and forth of him saying, "No, I'll do a Buffalo Trace," I said, "Cool, do a Buffalo Trace if you're going to pay for it." And his eyes opened up, saying, "What?" I said, "If you're paying for it, I'll drink whatever you're pouring. If I'm paying for it, just make what I want, please."
Absolutely.
But, yeah. So anyway, and always ticking over in my head is Dan Tulio. Drink what you like and like what you drink. So, yeah. But we're deviating off Kilbeggan here.
Well, I told you when you asked me what it would be like, I told you just be a casual catch-up, chit-chat, talk about Irish whiskey.
Yeah, I like it. I like it.
But yeah, so back to the whiskey, talking about it, the original versus the single grain, not focusing on the proof, even though, there is a 6 proof, 3% ABV difference, the single grain is actually a lot more peppery. It's a lot spicier. It versus the original, which, it carries that floral much more balanced. Balanced is the wrong word. A much sweeter profile, definitely, though.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're dealing with, before it goes into a cask, you're dealing with a very, very light distillate, a high ABV light, because column still distillate's a lot lighter and a lot more kind of shaped. The end product is shaped by what it's put into. So if you're putting that into a cask that's held, a rum cask, for instance, that's just gonna grab all of those sort of sweet flavors from that barrel. So we're fortunate with this whiskey, really, and a lot of distilleries that make single grain whiskey, because it's a very light flavor already to start out with. You can kind of grab flavors from different barrels. So that's what I like about this. And to be honest with you, if we were to have original single grain, rye and postel are a different story. But if we were to have original and single grain side by side, I'd be, or I should even add in Tyrconnell and Connemara to that conversation too. I'd be a single grain drinker all day, because I am a big bourbon fan. I like the corn flavor. That's or the flavor that's derived from corn, and I like the Maker's Mark, Jim Beam, Knob Creek barrels that we use as well. So it's a win-win for me. So I know Joseph asked a few minutes ago about Cooley and Kilbeggan and what's made where. So maybe, Sam, unless you have something to ask right now, maybe I just touch on that briefly. Yeah.
It's always yours, my friend.
So Cooley Distillery was opened in 1989 or 87, excuse me, and is a bigger kind of. Have you been there? You haven't been to Cooley or Kilbeggan, Sam, right? Or
I haven't been to Kentucky, Scotland, or Ireland.
Well, Ireland and Scotland are more difficult to get to than Kentucky. So you should get down there, and you have a reason now.
September.
You have a reason to get down to Buffalo Trace to sign a few copies of your book, which is good. And but get to Ireland, get to Scotland, because it's both booming, obviously, whiskey categories and such phenomenal distilleries to go and visit. So
I want to do the Middleton Whiskey Academy very badly.
Yeah, it looks amazing. To Joseph's question though, so Cooley Distillery reopened in 87, and it's not a visitor centre. It was a government-run distillation plant before it was reopened, or it was opened as a whiskey distillery in 89, and it does exactly what it's there to do, and that's produce some of the most award-winning Irish whiskey on the market today. And Connemara, some of the Kilbeggans that are made there, Tyrconnell, have received some amazing and noteworthy accolades over the last couple of years. And that's directly down to the distillery that they're produced in. Our second distillery, which is the name over the brands that we're trying right now, is Kilbeggan Distillery. And that's actually, and I know you had Jack on here, Sam, 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks, yeah.
So Kilbeggan is the oldest continuously licensed distillery in the world, in Ireland. And we haven't found a distillery that makes whiskey that's held a license longer than 264 years. So I know there's a lot of back and forth between Bushmills, Kilbeggan. How fortunate are we to neighbouring distilleries that can have this fun argument? But
really quickly on that note, I asked him about that. I don't know if you managed to catch the show at all. I did ask him about that because, there is some claims from other distilleries that, Bushmills hasn't had the license. They were farmers. The first was just a farm. And what I was told basically is that the distillation license was granted to the town of Bushmills.
In 1608, yeah.
Yeah, so what is the Bushmills Distillery now was a distillery back then too, but the license was owned by that town. since 1608, even if they weren't necessarily distilling or something along those lines.
Yeah, and that's amazing, and what a super history and story as well to tie yourself back to, and I mean, it's brilliant, and I think we're both, and not just Bushmills Kilbeggan, but the Irish whiskey category are fortunate to have two distilleries that are still producing whiskey today, and two brands that are not arguing, but a friendly bit of banter about who's older. What we do know is Kilbeggan is the oldest continuously licensed, and in terms of the distillery on-site production, and so we got our license to distill in the year 1757. You'll see on all of your bottles there, Sam. We actually produced whiskey and survived very turbulent times through world wars, through prohibition, through temperance movement in the US, famine in Ireland. You name it, the Irish whiskey industry was given every opportunity, or Kilbeggan especially, was given every opportunity to fail, and ended up obviously persevering. And unfortunately, like a lot of distilleries, Bushmills included, we were victims of those unrelated events that we all speak about, which are in your book as well, prohibition, war in Ireland. And it got to the point where a lot of distilleries actually were forced to shut their doors. And Andrew Watt, or Abbey Street or Waterside Distillery up in Derry, where Tyrconnell's made, is one example. And a lot of brands that we see and hear about today are examples too. So Kilbeggan shut its doors in 1954. And I mean, Jack spoke about production in Middleton for a period of time as well, and that's as a direct result of these unrelated events too. But we shut our doors in 54, and up until from 54 to 1989, the distillery actually lay dormant and no production was going on. But the reason we're allowed to stand here today or sit here today and talk about how we're the oldest continuously licensed distillery in Ireland and presumably the world is because the townspeople in Kilbeggan actually pooled their own money together every single year for those 35 years, from 54 to 89, and kept that license renewed, which is quite special. If it wasn't for their resilient nature and their foresight to keep doing that, I've no doubt that the distillery would have been bought up and knocked down and turned into something else, a housing estate or a factory or whatever you want. So that's why today, so very quickly, reopened in 1989. The team that reopened, so John Teeling and was involved as well, and a couple of other business partners, and they set their sights on, once again, they obviously had Cooley Distillery as a sister distillery producing whiskey since 1987. In 1989, Kilbeggan, the opportunity arose there. They opened that and set their sights on, once again, distilling again. And 2007, was it the pot still that got back up and running in 2007? And then in 2010, we installed the Oregon Pint fermenters, and we became, once again, a fully functional distillery from A to Z in 2010. And that's when the team set their sights on laying down some old heritage mash bills from the mid to late 1800s. And that's where the story of rye and pot still is born. Of rye and pot still, present day rye and pot still, Kilbeggan rye and pot still is born. So there's a distinction between the brands that are made, or the style, or the whiskies that are made at the two distilleries. As I said at the start, Kilbeggan is a little combination of both, mostly Cooley, original, and then Kilbeggan single grain is Cooley Distillery, simply because we don't have column stills at Kilbeggan Distillery to produce that whiskey. But the next two that we're going to talk about are 100% Kilbeggan Distillery, and this is where I really get excited as an employee and a representative of the distillery, because these are two of some of the newest whiskies to the category, but are born from historic mash bills, which is quite nice.
Joe mentioned something cool earlier. By the way, I wanted to spotlight that. He said his wife's grandmother was from Tullamore.
Lovely, yeah. That's where Johnny and Alison Egan are from Egan's Irish Whiskey. So there is a huge Egan diaspora in the Midwest, really, around
Any relation?
Who? Joseph and I, or Joseph's great grandmother?
No,
Possibly.
Egan whiskey and you.
No, no direct relation. No, no. I'm sure if we were to dig very deep back, there's a tie there, but no. But I mean, the Midlands there's a lot of Egans, which is good to see.
And then he also mentioned about the Tullamore pot still that you guys have.
Yeah. So that's the oldest. We're very fortunate to have gotten that. And thanks, Joseph, for bringing it up. But it's directly responsible for the next two whiskies we're going to talk about. And that's, Sam, I don't know if you noticed, but it's the oldest whiskey pot still in the world.
I did not. That's kind of cool.
Over 186 years old. So we're yet to find a distillery around the world that's making whiskey in a pot still of that age. We'll do a toast, Joseph.
That's really cool.
Elizabeth Egan.
Let's do a toast to Ms. Elizabeth Egan.
But I'll pour a little glass. Yeah, so there you go. Cheers. You don't have rye, Sam, but I just poured it here. But cheers.
Well, I'm going to make you talk about that one now.
Yeah.
Sláinte.
So the old pot still is responsible for this. So if you can rewind back to 2010, the distillery, once again, if you can imagine, becomes a fully functional. Did I lose you there?
Nope. I put you full screen.
Okay. So the distillery becomes a fully functional distillery once again in 2010. And we set our sights on reintroducing some of the old heritage mash bills that were from Kilbeggan Distillery. And rye and pot still were one. So Sam doesn't have rye in front of him, but this is we launched this in 2019 in January 2019 in New York, the Dead Rabbit in New York, and it's a whiskey made up of malted barley, unmalted barley, and 30% rye. So as I mentioned earlier on, it's slightly lower rye content compared to other rye whiskies, particularly American rye whiskies. So it delivers a slightly mellow taste or a softer rye punch than you'd get from a typical rye whiskey made here in America. What are you doing, Sam? You there?
I needed a fan because it's kind of hot in here, so I had to go get my fan set up. So I figured no one wanted to see me running around getting this nice cooling fan set up, so I put you full screen for a second.
I cracked my door. Yeah, so there's a funny story behind this Kilbeggan rye, and we actually laid this down in 2010, all right, to release with the aim in 2018 or 19 to release a pot still Irish whiskey. And you're familiar with pot still, right? There's a section on it in the book.
I am. It took a lot for me to wrap my head around that, but I got it now.
Yeah, brilliant. And it's a style of whiskey dating back to the 18th century. Basically, the English imposed a tax on malted barley, and the Irish distillers, crafty enough, decided to use enough unmalted barley, not to spoil the brew, but to prove a point and pay as little tax as possible. And unbeknownst to them, they were creating a style of whiskey that would live on for centuries, and that's where pot still Irish whiskey was born. So we laid this down in 2010, as I said, malted barley, unmalted barley, and 30% rye. All right. In halfway through its maturation period in 2014, the technical file, the Irish Whiskey Association changed the technical file on pot still Irish whiskey, and it was malted barley, unmalted barley, and a third grain, and they changed it to malted barley, unmalted barley, and no more than 5% of a third grain. So because this is 30% rye, we couldn't technically call it a pot still Irish whiskey. So we had to, I believe it was 2017, sit down with the association and say, hey, this is what we have maturing in a cask right now. This is what we wanted to release it as. This is what we now want to release it as, a Kilbeggan Irish whiskey small batch rye. And we got the go ahead. So we're now the first. So it's made very, very similar to a pot still. That's why I said at the start that it's comparable to a pot still Irish whiskey that you'd buy on a shelf today. But it has that rye component at the end, that 30% rye, which yields a very, very spicy especially paired with the malted and unmalted barley, a very spicy flavor, which is nice. But that could be a section of your, or another style of Irish whiskey, maybe in your beginner's guide to whiskey second release.
Talk about Poitin for a second, would you?
Yeah, Poitin is Irish.
Everyone assumes Poitin is just Irish white dog, but it's not. It's more than that. Yes, it's unaged Irish distillate, but it's not, whiskey white dog. It's a totally different thing.
Well, you can make Poitin from a lot of stuff. And Poitin means small pot. And it's very similar to moonshine, very, very similar to how it's made. It was historically made and hidden in the mountains or around Ireland. I remember very, very vividly grabbing a bottle of Coca-Cola from our liquor store shelf and tasting it when I was probably 7. It looked like water. And my mom told me it was holy water, which it's probably called in a lot of places as well. So it's I'm sure there's a lot of houses in Ireland, majority of houses in Ireland, that have a bottle of Poitin somewhere in the house. But yeah, it's a great history, and I love the. I agree with Joseph. Yeah, but Poitin's a category that's growing. I mean, you look at there's a number of brands that are on the shelves right now of Irish Poitin. Cooley made a Poitin years ago, which was a very, very limited release that you'll find online, I'm sure. But it's it's an interesting spirit for sure, with a deep history. Makes a great cocktail. Bar 1661 in Dublin do a lovely Belfast coffee as well with and they're big.
And Bon Poitin as well.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Another one who was a huge help in getting part of the Irish whiskey section taken care of was, I believe you connected me with him, was Dave Mulligan from Bar 1661 and Bon Poitin.
Yeah, it mightn't have been me. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, what they're doing, Mad March Hares and Poitin that's out there. Was
either you or Mike Carr?
It's a category that's I don't know how rapidly it's growing, but it's a category that's very interesting, and I look forward to it. I'm not massively into it, even though I have a couple of bottles and that Coca-Cola bottle in my room, but that old Coca-Cola bottle filled with holy water. But I don't know where. That's what's cool about. That's what's really cool about a style of spirit that is seeped in so much history that you have I don't know where that's from. That's my grandfather who's passed away now. That gave that to dad or just had it. But you don't know where it's from, and there's so many stories. If you were to sit down, to be honest, Sam, that's what I'm looking forward to most is getting to a pub back in Ireland or wherever it happens to be, and just striking up these conversations sit me beside someone 50 years older
Dude,
for a few pints and a whiskey, and I'm in my element.
What's your go-to pint?
Guinness, for sure. Yeah.
A respectable choice. A good choice.
No
wrong answer unless you said, like fucking Blue Moon.
Yeah. No, I'm not it's not that I'm a fan, I just haven't explored craft beers a whole lot, and I know there's a big grow. You see the craft beer scene growing as well. Talking about
Irish beers, it's Smithwick's all the way for me.
Like Smithwick's, yeah.
I used to,
and there's a Smithwick's and Kilbeggan relationship as well. Did you know that? John Locke's
talk
daughter.
About that, please.
Well, years ago in the 40s, before when the Locks owned Kilbeggan Distillery, one of John Locke's daughters married into Smithwick's family. So there's a nice connection there. Nothing that we really speak about today, but just a fun talking point. But Smithwick's, yeah. I mean, Murphy's great stout, but I'm a big Guinness fan. I find that like in Ireland, your definitely your stout choice is shaped by what your family members drank as well. And Dad obviously loves a good Guinness.
Definitely. Emily said, "Mother wasn't wrong about poitin being holy."
Yeah, you feel holy the next morning after drinking a couple of suppers with it. But yeah, Guinness. I used to work in Diageo in Guinness as well in Dublin. So that was a fantastic job to have as a college student.
I can only imagine.
Giving tours of the
and I'm sure it's still a fantastic job. You know, our friend Owen works for Diageo on Guinness now. Good guy.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I
haven't seen him in a long while, but good guy.
He's in California?
Yeah, San Diego last I checked.
He was on Barry's Lock-In live stream a few weeks ago.
To be honest, I've actually never watched a Lock-In live stream. I keep meaning to.
Yeah, you gotta get on it.
I gotta watch it when either you're on or Donna's on, so I can give you both shit.
Well, I mean, you should. They're good, very good fun. I mean, you're in a perfect time zone for it. Kicking off at 4 p.m. on a Friday evening. I feel for the Irish dialing in. I have to get on at midnight and stay up till 3 or 4 in the morning. But that's the nature of a lock-in.
I've had that with a couple of people who were like, we would love to join you for a live stream, Sam, but you know, midnight to 2 a.m. our time is a little difficult. And I'm like, I can do 10 to midnight your time, 10 p.m. to 10 p.m. to 2 to midnight. And usually they're like, okay, we can work with that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Joe said he missed the most recent live stream, but has the green Tua glasses.
Oh, brilliant! Yeah, I've seen them.
Like $30 for a glass.
Where?
The green Tuas were like 20 or $30 for a glass or for 2 glasses.
They're cool though, right? They're like a nice little collector's edition.
Yeah, they're beautiful. They're emerald green, you know, which makes people think, you know, Emerald Isle green Irish. Do you know where that whole thing started? Obviously, the Irish flag is green, white, and orange, not orange, white, and green.
No, that's the Ivory Coast.
I learned that from did you watch that video I texted you?
Which one?
The Foil Arms and Hog, who was St. Patrick?
Oh, yeah. I like those guys a lot. Yeah.
They're hilarious.
Yeah.
No,
I don't know where
they're the ones who taught me about green, white, orange, not orange, white, green.
I will give you a good one though if you want a little fun fact or nugget of info. Of course,
always.
That not to keep harping on, well, to Diageo beers, but not to keep harping on about Guinness, but the harp on a Guinness glass, I don't know if I have one around here, a couple of them somewhere. So people look at the harp on the Guinness glass, and do you know what that denotes or that is?
No, what?
Well, I mean, it's perceived to be the symbol of Ireland, right? It's on our currency. Well, it was on it's on the euro. If you grab a €2 coin or something, the harp is on it. But Arthur Guinness in 1759 actually started using the harp. I don't know if it was 1759 when he started using the harp, but anyway, Guinness used the harp, okay, as we know today, on a Guinness glass or on any Guinness image. And when Ireland got its independence from Britain, the Irish Republic actually wanted to use the harp as well. But Guinness, believe it or not, owned the trademark to the harp as we see it on a glass. And the Irish Republic use a harp, yes, but it's actually inverted. It's upside down. So if you see our passports, if you see a currency or any Irish diplomatic logo or anything that has a harp on it, it's very similar to the Guinness glass but turned upside down. So Guinness actually owned the rights to the harp before Ireland did, which is quite interesting.
That's funny.
So I don't know your question or the answer to your question on emerald green, but I do love that fact about Guinness.
Joe mentioned the 1759 Society.
Yeah.
Who were they?
I don't know. I don't know, Joseph, who the society are, but I do remember Arthur's Day and raising pints of Guinness to Arthur Guinness across Arthur's Day in Ireland. Anyway, will we move on to our last one, Sam? Which you haven't.
Did you finish talking about the rye?
I did, yeah. I think I did. So it's an interesting whiskey. It's bottled at 43%, 86 proof. Again, I'd encourage someone to try it neat, get those kind of rye notes. The malted and unmalted barley is very, very present and evident there. But the rye spice leaves a really, really nice, soft, subtle rye spiciness. Not one, one of our biggest challenges, or mine anyway, since we launched rye in January 2019, has been talking to, and it's funny because we've only had a year of it really, but talking to distributors and trade and consumers for that matter about rye, and they automatically, when they see rye, automatically compare it to an American rye that has kind of like a Knob Creek or Jim Beam or Booker's rye, for those of you can get your hands on it, and that has
good luck with that.
A very high rye content, and this is only 30%. So one of the challenges that we immediately faced was trying to make that distinction between an Irish whiskey that has rye versus a rye whiskey. So just know that if you are going out to buy a bottle and you are comparing it to another whiskey, probably not the best idea to compare it to another rye whiskey. If you're a big rye whiskey fan, it sits on the shelf with those pot still whiskeys that we mentioned earlier, like the one we're about to try right now, the Kilbeggan pot still.
How many brands have an Irish rye? It's not a common thing. People were all excited to hear you talk about the Kilbeggan rye today, because everyone knows that an Irish rye whiskey is not a very common thing. So can you tell us a little bit more about, who has one?
Yeah,
other than you guys?
No, nobody, Sam. Kilbeggan's the only whiskey right now that has rye in the mash bill. So
wow.
there are a lot of distilleries that are laying down or have whiskies matured with rye. I won't say a lot, but a few distilleries that have rye in that mash bill maturing right now. But as we speak, Kilbeggan small batch rye is the only Irish whiskey to have rye in the mash bill, which is pretty special.
That is very cool, and it's a neat little claim to fame. Also, just coming back real quick, Joe said that 1759 is the old Guinness Society from the 90s.
Lovely. I need to join them.
Yeah, you and me both.
Yeah. But it goes back to your point earlier on, how the category is growing. There's a lot of innovation. It's great to see, even though we're the only brand right now that has rye in the mash bill, in 5 to 10 years' time, there's going to be so many whiskies that have rye and grains that we might never have thought could be in an Irish whiskey bottle. Right, you've moved ahead.
Now, speaking of grain, for Irish whiskey, what are the grains allowed to be used? Can you use any grain, or does it have to be, barley, wheat, oat, rye, of course, and corn?
Corn, anything. There's no kind of stipulation that lay in the technical file that lays out what you can and can't use in terms of grain.
Joe says we need more Irish stuff made from a higher oat content.
Well, I don't know if Joe has, and maybe he can just text or type it in if he has this bottle in front of him. But this is quite unique as well. It's the only Irish whiskey that we can taste today in our lifetime that has oats in the mash bill. So, is this your first time trying it, Sam?
Yeah.
Is it really?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Here, we'll have a quick.
Because I would have tried it at Tales, but I don't think it hadn't launched at Tales at that, because, the last Tales was 2019.
No.
Which is when I got to try the rye. I remember trying the rye at Tales 19 or Tales 18. But there was no Tales 2020, so there was no, recharge lounge. We all weren't in New Orleans.
This launched in January 19th, I think it was, 2020. So just over a year ago, about 14 months ago.
Wow.
So have a taste. Maybe you can give us a quick toast. before we taste? You got one?
Sorry, I was distracted. Here's to cheating, stealing, fighting, and drinking. If you cheat, wait. God damn it. Just shut up and drink.
Good man. Cheers. So this is another one of the whiskeys that back in 2010. Go for it.
Here's to cheating, stealing, fighting. If you cheat, may you cheat death. If you steal, may you steal a lover's heart. If you fight, may you fight for a brother. And if you drink, may you drink with me. Slanchava.
Good man. Very good. So this like rye is one of the whiskeys that we launched in 1920. But really the story goes back to 2010 when the distillery got back up and running again. And that aim from the team there to lay down some of the old 1800s mash bills that were produced at Kilbeggan. So this is the coolest thing about these two. By two, I mean Kilbeggan rye and single pot still that we're trying now.
Right.
Is that these are old styles of whiskey and mash bills that were made at Kilbeggan Distillery 200 years ago. You know?
This is one of the heritage bottles, the heritage mash bills you were talking about.
It's unbelievable. And to have, I didn't mention it with rye, but I kind of probably harp on about it too much. I don't know if it's as cool as I think it is, but to have Kilbeggan small batch rye, which we just tried, yeah.
You just tried.
I just tried to be released, but and tell me, Sam, if I'm mad here in the head thinking this is really cool, but to have
yes, you were saying though,
but to have that be named in 2019 as within the Irish Whiskey Association at a time when the Irish whiskey category is the fastest growing brown spirit category in the world, but to have rye being produced at the oldest operating distillery in Ireland or continuously licensed distillery in Ireland, and the first whiskey we launch from that distillery gets named best newcomer to the category, and wins
massive
an innovation award. I think it's pretty cool. So
massive.
This is the second release from Kilbeggan Distillery, and I think the bar has been pushed up and set at a very, very high level. And I don't know if you got a chance to tune into our Kilbeggan live stream last Wednesday, Patrick's Day, 2 weeks ago.
No, I didn't know about it.
Yeah, we sat down with Huey and Podge, who are two distillers at the distillery responsible for rye and pot still, and they're pretty excited about what they have in the pipeline and what can come from the distillery, because it truly is a boutique distillery in every sense of the word.
Can you give us a little sneak preview of what's to come?
That's what I asked them on a live stream last week, and they're as coy as ever, and maybe they did. They're from Kilbeggan and neighbouring towns, so they're quite hard to understand at the best of times. So maybe they did tell me, and I just didn't understand them. But we're making the last year again is not a good year to reference in it for whiskey production or bar business or restaurant or whatever you have it. But they are making whiskey, and it's eye-opening and exciting walking into the Kilbeggan distillery warehouses and seeing some of the barrels that are laid down. Brilliant. So anyway,
Joe is complimenting, saying Podge is awesome.
He is.
He gave Joe a sneak preview of the rye back in 2018 when he was there last, in fact.
Love it. So Joe tried it.
That's very cool.
So the pot still here is, so remember I mentioned about rye being malted barley, unmalted barley, and 30% rye. So it can't technically be called a single pot still because it's over that 5% threshold.
Now, hold on 1 second, please, if you don't mind, sir. That mash bill doesn't make sense.
Okay.
You have 30-30-30. You're missing 10%.
No, it doesn't have to be 30-30 of the first two.
No, but you said it's 30% malted, 30% unmalted, and 30% rye. Those are your words.
No. I apologize if I did. It's malted barley, unmalted barley, and 30% rye.
Okay.
So the 70% there are made up of malted and unmalted barley, which the team don't actually mention what the actual percentage breakdown between malted and unmalted barley is.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's about 35, 30, give or take a couple of percent.
Roughly, gotcha.
And that's for rye. So
Right.
So again, but the most important thing to remember is because the reason it can't be called a single pot still Irish whiskey is because it's not 5% or less of a third grain. Yeah.
Right. It's more than it's 30% of that third grain.
So it's Kilbeggan Irish whiskey, small batch rye. So when we then went to bottle or come up with a label and a name and start that process, kick that process off for Kilbeggan single pot still Irish whiskey here, we were in good shape because this is malted and unmalted barley and 2.5% oats. So it excuse me, it falls under that 5%. So we're in the green. We're allowed to call it a pot still Irish whiskey. And then the malted and unmalted barley component lend that nutty kind of dried fruit flavor that's typically associated with pot still Irish whiskey. And then the oats, which you're trying for the first time, I can only describe as their Irish oats, as it lends a very, you mentioned viscous earlier, very viscous kind of thick flavor or feel to the whiskey, but it's extremely soft. A goodish comparison would be if you're tasting oatmeal, you drain off the oats and taste the water that you're draining from your oatmeal or your porridge, and that's what I get.
So kind of like drinking the milk from a Weetabix bowl of Weetabix. If
oats, yeah, Oatabix.
I don't know if you know this. My mother's English, so I grew up with Weetabix and all that, and Bird's English custard.
Yeah, love it. I used to drink Birds and a pint of milk for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Great stuff.
That explains why you're such a hyperactive person, Mike.
Yeah, very tasty.
So while I focus on deciphering the pot still, would you mind telling us a little about your career and how you got started working in the Irish beer and then spirits industry, and how you ended up over here from the Emerald Isle?
Yeah, and we'll have to figure out why it's called Emerald as well. That's on our to-do list.
Yeah, that's.
Of course.
I've heard it my entire life. Yeah, Ireland, the Emerald Isle.
Yeah, I don't know. I probably heard that when I came over here more so than I ever did growing up there in Dublin.
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, over there, you don't have green beer and four-leaf clovers and leprechauns running around on March 17th.
You're very, very right. We don't. March 17th is a different kettle of fish in Dublin than in Ireland.
And if you guys go to my Instagram, actually, jump back a couple of weeks, I did a little IGTV video talking about the real history behind St. Patrick's Day in its form as a religious holiday. So go ahead and check me out on Instagram, and it probably posted to my Facebook actually as well. Instagram is @ScriberSpirits, and you can find me on Facebook @The Beginner's Guide to Whiskey.
Good for you, Sam. Yeah, because a lot of people don't know it and think here, or probably don't think as to where St. Patrick's Day comes from or is derived. But it is a religious holiday. And for me growing up, it was always, not to harp on about it here, but it was always growing up and going into Croke Park, which is our a stadium and one of many stadia in Ireland, but it's a stadium in Dublin where we watched Gaelic football. So it's always going to watch sporting events. And you might...
And he means football like soccer, not football, like the NFL.
I mean Gaelic football, which is kind of a combination between Australian rules football.
Oh, it's a different... Oh, it's a totally different thing. Never mind. Ignore me.
It's our national sport. It's an amateur sport, and I'm the biggest advocate for Kilbeggan and Gaelic football. But no, it's an amazing sport. But it's kind of a combination between not to get off your question about where I career path or whatever, but it's a combination between Australian rules and soccer / a bit of rugby thrown in. Great sport. And then we also have another national sport, hurling and handball, which is an Irish sport as well.
Wait, hand or ham?
Handball is a Gaelic game.
I played a variant of handball, at the very least, growing up in, elementary school.
What was it?
You got these giant red rubber balls, and you got to whack it against like a wall or something.
With your hand?
It's like with your hand, like you can do this, you can do this, you can do this.
There you go, Sam.
Do this, whatever. But you just
you were playing Irish sports and you didn't even know it.
The more you know.
Anyway, Patrick's Day for me was a bit of football going into, and pubs didn't open in the morning. And it was only when I shouldn't say in the morning, like we all expect pubs to open in the morning, but pubs didn't open until the afternoon or evening. And it was my first Patrick's Day here. I couldn't believe it. I actually remember it vividly. We had an event going on in a bar on the river here called Lizzie McNeil's in Chicago. And I bought about 24 Dunkin' Donuts. It was a novelty still to be going to Dunkin' Donuts when I landed here. And I thought I was going to be welcomed in with the red carpet, bringing in at about 11 a.m., 10 a.m. say. I brought down a box of coffee and a big box of donuts for the team that I figured would be only putting out the chairs and setting up. And I walked in at 10 a.m. and there were people jumping on bars. There were people doing shots, everything. And I was so unprepared for that. So anyway, it's celebrated slightly differently here than it is at home.
Sure, let's go with slightly.
Which is great.
I remember my first St. Patrick's Day behind the bar. It was a shit show, to say the least. There was St. Patrick's Day bar crawl hosted by another Irish whiskey brand, actually. And they came into my bar, and we were like stop 4 or 5 of like 6 or 7 or whatever. So we were almost the exact last stop. And my boss had suspenders on with shot glasses above the nipples. And it was slammed. I don't think we were pouring Guinness. We were just pouring through beer like crazy.
Yeah.
Beer and shots and cocktails. It was a bar back. I didn't know what to expect. It was my first year ever in service behind a bar. I'd gone to a bar on St. Patrick's Day once before, but it was later in the evening. And, it had died down a bit. And shame to say, I had a green beer.
Did you?
I
want to try one. I've never actually
green.
Had one.
It was just an Italian beer that was dyed green with food coloring.
Yeah. You know what, though?
I mean, if Ireland is listening, you could capitalize on St. Patrick's Day in America by intentionally brewing a green beer with glitter in it.
Yeah. Somehow I think it might be more cost effective to just go down the Miller Lite or Bud Light route with a bit of green dye. But saying that,
yes, but
I think drink aside or just drunkenness aside, I think it's great that there's such a pride with a lot of people that might not be Irish, but a pride to associate themselves with Irishness and Irish people. And there's very few cultures around the world, isn't there? This is a question. There's very few cultures around the world that people are so happy and proud to identify with, collectively, as a country, which is super to be part of. And I don't think we should ever knock the celebrations that happen here. We always encourage, obviously, people to drink responsibly, But just
No, I agree with you completely. We shouldn't knock it, but I do wish more people would learn about it, because for me, when I did the research on St. Patrick, or St. Padraig, as his non-anglicized name is, Padraig is, as you know, but a lot of people might not. Patrick obviously is anglicized. It's Padraig. I was really, it was like an eye opener. It's like, oh wow, that's really cool. This is, the origins of it as a religious holiday, kind of a day of atonement. It's during Lent in Ireland. And, you'd go to church and you see people you haven't seen for a little while. And then probably someone came over here from Ireland and was like, oh yeah, today's St. Patrick's Day. I'm having a couple of drinks. And then somebody else, probably an American, is like, oh, that's so cool. I'll have a couple of drinks. And he told somebody else, who told somebody else, who told somebody else. The original meaning got lost.
Sam, I think you've hit. I think you've scratched the surface of what your second book should be, as to how that got lost. I would read that for sure. And the conversation.
How drinking holidays really got started.
Yeah.
Hint: it's not what you think.
No, but you're right though. You're right. I enjoy March, and I thoroughly enjoy being Irish in America, and around, like anywhere in the world, because it's a time of the year where everyone supports Ireland.
Absolutely. St. Patrick's Day is obviously one day, but March kind of has become Irish month. There's a lot more corned beef and cabbage. There's a lot more Guinness drunk. There's a lot more Irish whiskey drank and sold.
I've never had corned beef and cabbage, believe it or not.
I think that's another American thing, honestly.
Maybe I'm a phony Irish person.
Again, I think that's an American thing.
Yeah, but, listen, whatever. But I will say though that we at Kilbeggan this year, we and I'm sure you've seen some of our posts and stuff. But tomorrow ends our Kilbeggan March. You mentioned Patrick's March versus Day. We celebrated all 31 days this year because we didn't have the opportunity to celebrate Patrick's Day last year. It was cut short for a lot of us. So we paired up with, across our 5 focus markets, we paired up with a lot of our like best, or anyone who wanted to participate really, key on and off premise accounts, and we delivered cocktail kits to them. And take for instance whatever bar in LA, right, that you might go to if they wanted to participate.
Well, say the old fella, because it's Irish and it's traditional Irish because Kevin Kearns.
Yeah, I mean, so California, just to be clear, is not a focus.
Yeah, I'm sad about that.
Yeah, you'd have 4 whiskeys in front of you if it was. But we paired up with these on and off premise accounts. We delivered these amazing kits. I have one of them over here. And bartenders or whoever's behind the bar could actually make a Kilbeggan cocktail. So if I walk into that bar or any bar across our focus market and say, right, I love a sour, or I want to take home a Kilbeggan cocktail, they can make it for us. What are you doing?
Oh, I'm flattening out the foil while you're talking. Be that's OCD. It's driving me crazy that it's all scrunched up.
It's getting in the way. That's all I can hear. But anyway, they can go into the bar and purchase these Kilbeggan cocktails and take them home with them. So we decided from the 1st of March to the 31st to celebrate the month of March, and coined it the Kilbeggan March, which is quite nice. So looking forward to doing that next year for sure. Could be an annual thing now where we focus on the full 31 days versus just 1 or typically 2 or 3 days that people focus on. But anyway, to go back to our whiskey, Sam.
Back to you, actually, Mike.
So it's made, as Joseph mentioned, in the oldest pot still.
No, Mike. Back to you. We never finished talking about you.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I did marketing and tourism in college, in university in Dublin, and love everything to do with Ireland as a country, to be honest with you, and promoting Ireland as a brand. My mom is from Chicago, You know that. I told you that before. So we grew
I
up
think
always
so.
always holidaying here, and coming over here as maybe once a year if we could. So there was always that connection between Ireland and America. Fortunately, a US passport holder, which is nice, which helps. But through university, it's funny. I actually we were sitting in class one day in college, and a lady walked in from Cape Cod, from a resort and a hotel resort called Ocean Edge, and she asked, "Is anyone? We're looking for 10 candidates to come over and actually work in our 4-5 now Diamond Golf Resort in Brewster, on Cape Cod, and will you interview and who's willing to do it?" And I was hand up straight away, of course. So that's where I really got a taste for the States and living here, which would be so I did that for 6 months on an internship, back to college, finished final year of college, and throughout final year in university, or third and fourth year in college in Dublin, I actually got a part-time job doing tours of the Guinness Storehouse, which is amazing. So that really kind of gave me an insight into Irish, not so much distilling, but you can't walk down through the Guinness Brewery in Dublin without seeing the old Roe & Co. Or George Roe Distillery, which is on the same site. But given tours of Guinness history in Dublin, you have to talk a little bit about whiskey. It's a similar conversation. But anyway, that gave me an opportunity to chat about and get to know the brewery industry and the brewery history in Dublin. And then when I finished college, I got on a very similar program to a lot of the people that you know, the EOP program, the Export Orientation Program with IBEC, the Irish Business and Employers Confederation, and came out here with Beam, and came out for 12 months. I think actually came out for 18 months, and 8 years later, I'm married to an American girl.
And again, congratulations on that. You got
Cheers.
married during COVID. So let's always toast to Michael and Kristen Egan.
Thank you, Sam.
To
Appreciate
your
it.
health and your happiness, my friend.
Launcher. But anyway, what I was saying is that 2013 moved out here with 4 distilleries on the island of Ireland. Cooley, Kilbeggan were one, and then Middleton, Bushmills. And it's funny, like I remember for years talking about, this is Greenore, which was, I'm sure it's probably mentioned in the book too. That's the old Kilbeggan single grain.
It's actually not, but what I meant to do, I've forgotten all about it. Edwin, obviously most of you don't know Edwin. Edwin is a Beam Suntory employee here in Los Angeles. He found a bottle of Greenore at an account, and they were charging like $8 a glass.
Lovely.
I meant to go and buy a bottle. I meant to go and buy a glass like to go to have it with me today, but I forgot all about it.
Well, if you can find a bottle somewhere, I would buy it, because it's never made again. The recipe kind of slightly shifted, not so much. Greenore is 96% corn, 4% barley. Kilbeggan single grain is 94% corn, 6% barley. So not a huge shift in recipe. But Greenore is an award-winning Irish whiskey that will never be made again, and so I'd pick it up if you can find it. Anyway, when I moved here, for years we were talking about Greenore or single grain being the only single grain Irish whiskey on the market, and Connemara being the only Irish peated single malt on the market. Now we can't say that. There's a number of
let's say neither is true anymore.
Yes. Now we're saying rye is the only Irish, Kilbeggan rye is the only Irish whiskey with rye in the mash bill. So it's just an example as to how fast the category is growing. I'm excited for 5 years' time, to be honest, Sam.
I cannot wait to see what else you guys put out in 5 years' time.
Yeah.
Joe is saying he has a bottle of the Greenore.
Brilliant.
And I echo Chris's sentiments, who just said he got to Denver, by the way, and is pouring a Kilbeggan rye. Chris says, God damn it, of course you do.
Chris has made it home safe and sound, which is good to hear.
Yes. So Chris
Yeah.
actually is another graduate of the program. He lives in Colorado, and he has two properties, one in the mountains and then one in Denver. So he said he just got to Denver and is now pouring a Kilbeggan rye.
Brilliant. Chris, we just did last Monday an event with 5280 out of Denver, or out of I assume they expand out over Denver to Colorado. Myself and Mark Staunton. I don't know if you know Mark from the Truffle Pig. Yeah, we had a great event last Monday. So I look forward to getting out to Denver, and hopefully you and I, our paths cross, and we can enjoy a Kilbeggan rye together.
I could meet you there too. Denver's only like an hour and a half flight, 2 hours maybe.
Yeah, we could make that
I was
work.
actually out there in October with someone whom you probably know, Rick Edwards, who used to work on Glenlivet and some of their Irish whiskeys.
Yeah. So we were there.
He's working on Stranahan's now, American single malt out of Colorado, and they had an event out there that I flew out for.
Lovely. In October.
So we're running out of, last October. So we're running low on time, and that's perfect because it means we had a good, fun time chatting, because where the hell did the time go?
We didn't even
I want to talk.
We didn't even talk about a lot of the key talking points that I wanted to mention.
Well, go ahead. I will be quiet while you talk then.
No, I'm joking. No, I just think it's such an interesting category, and what you're doing, Sam, with this show in terms of the Irish whiskey sort of workers and brands that you're talking to. It's an interesting category, and we have such an interesting brand and distillery and distilleries here that we could talk for this. We could easily do another 2 hours.
We could easily do another 2 episodes just on the different SKUs. You know, we could go through Tyrconnell and go through Connemara. So another 4 hours, just focusing on those 2 brands as well. Obviously, right now, everyone's excited for Blue Spot to hit the market. 7-year-old cask strength Irish whiskey from J.A. Mitchell and Sons, now Pernod Ricard. Can we expect to see a cask strength from Kilbeggan or Tyrconnell? Connemara has their repeated cask strength.
I mean, if you're lucky enough and you know the right people, you can actually get your hands on a bottle of Kilbeggan single pot still at cask strength. The Irish Whiskey Society ran a limited release expression, which I haven't tried. I've tried a cask strength back at the distillery 2 years ago, so not at its finished age, but near to it. Tasty, very, very, very tasty whiskey with a drop of water as well, I would say. But yes, there is scope for cask strength releases, and there's definitely scope for aged releases like we spoke about an hour and a half ago, and other innovations within the category as well. So, I mean, there's as I said, we're distilling every day. We're making whiskey every day at the distillery, and there's that has to be released sometime, and the team are so in tune with what's going on in the category right now. And as I said to you, the bar has been set very, very high with rye and pot still, that we have a great opportunity to continue those innovative limited releases. I will say before we finish up, Sam, that for people watching, both rye and pot still, the last 2 whiskies that we spoke about and tried, are limited releases. So when they're gone, they're gone. Unfortunately. So once Mission or whoever else has it in LA is sold out, they'll struggle to get their hands on some more. So if you do have a bottle or see a bottle or a hemming and hawing about whether you should buy a bottle or not, I'd pick one up, because it's never
just do it.
That's not going to be made again. Yeah.
Now, the big question, kind of the elephant in the room, if you will, talking about, new releases and production every day. How has COVID affected production at the Kilbeggan Cooley Distillery?
Yeah, it's been tough. Thanks for asking as well, because a lot of the team at Cooley's a bigger production site. Just to put it into perspective for you or anyone watching, Kilbeggan has at full tilt, has has an output of about 25,000 liters a year. So very, very small. Cooley has...
Yeah, it's pretty small.
And that's all pot still. Cooley has a grain capacity at full tilt again of about close to 3 million liters a year, and a pot still capacity.
Holy hell.
And that's still smallish compared to some bigger guys as well in Ireland and elsewhere. But so that's just grain, 3 mil, and then a pot still capacity of about close to 850,000 liters a year. So it's a much, much bigger, and that's simply because it's run on a daily basis. It's a bigger whiskey, it's a bigger distillery, obviously, but it's run on a daily basis.
Sure.
Kilbeggan has a much, much smaller capacity. So we can't, if we were to produce single pot still or rye for a line item and make it a line item readily available year round, that's all we'd be doing. So I think it's cool to have a small batch. I still don't understand the definition of small batch, but to have a small batch.
I'm glad you touched on that. There is no definition of small batch. Small batch is a marketing term created by people in a boardroom to be like, oh, well, how do we make our whiskey stand out? Oh, we're a small batch. So, there's a limited number of it. No, respectfully, shut the fuck up. Small batch does not mean anything.
I do remember Fred No getting asked this question. Are we going to cut off? No, we're still good. We're not going to cut off.
No, we're good.
Okay. I do remember Fred.
No. Like, it's not like Zoom where it cuts off at a certain time.
Okay.
We can keep going for 6 hours, and as long as I don't hit end broadcast, we're good to go.
So I remember Fred getting asked this question at a whiskey fest or whatever we were at before. What is a small batch? Because what is it? Is it Knob Creek says small batch in the bottle, or
something like that, anyway.
Yeah. But his explanation was it's smaller than the batch we previously made, which is perfect, and that works. But
yeah, exactly.
So my point is that Kilbeggan is truly a small batch distillery. It's tiny. So when you get to go there, when anyone watching gets to go there, you'll go in and you'll see that it's a boutique, it's a craft, it's a small batch distillery in every sense of the word. So if we were to produce pot still year round, it would be all we're doing. So I think it's cool to have the oldest continuously licensed distillery in Ireland, presumably the world, start to release these limited edition historical mash bills, and
absolutely,
and start to maybe shake up the category a little bit, and or give consumers a chance to try what was made at this distillery 200 plus years ago.
Well, that is, I think, a good note to end on. Mike, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. I know we were trying to get this done for a little while, and then you're like, well, can you give me, March 16th? And I'm like, I gave it to Bushmills already. And you're like,
I never got offered March 16th. Yeah. March 30th.
To Jack. You're closing out the month.
Yes, exactly.
Think of it that way. You are the finisher. Save the best for last, if you will.
Exactly. Now, Sam, thanks for your time.
Mike, no, thank you for your time. Also, just for legal reasons, a big thank you to Mike and Beam Sensory for providing these bottles today so that we could taste through them and talk with them, with all you guys for watching. Thank you for tuning in. If you haven't already, remember to hit that like button and the subscribe button and ring the notification bell. I will see you guys next week and follow on social media for next week's guest announcement. Here's to you. Here's to me. I don't know. I was going to say something profound, but I lost it. So, cheers.
And everyone else watching and enjoying a drop of whiskey tonight. Cheers, Sam.
Mike, don't go anywhere. We're going to end this broadcast, but you stay right where you are. Cheers, all. Thanks for watching. Good night.